What's up, YouTube? It's time for a review of the new Starset record Vessels, out this past Friday, January 20th. This is the Ohio-based band's second record and first since their 2014 debut Transmissions, which made some waves with more of the hard rock slash mainstream leaning alt metal world. The style this band play is, at its core, part of that world. The often, let's face it, manufactured hard rock bands made in the mold of Linkin Park, 3 Days Grace, and Skillet, bands that focus on simple, straightforward song structures with even simpler, down-tuned guitar riffs and uber melodic choruses with an ever so angsty edge to them. But Starset, while existing in this demographic, go about it a bit differently, because their sound is very much structured and delivered like rock music, but the band turn it into this massive digital spectacle with layers and layers of keyboards and cinematic strings and computerized effects to kind of pair with their futuristic image and their futuristic lyrical themes. Starset lather on these effects so thick that their sound is almost better described as electro rock or electro alt metal, if I'm gonna start making up genres here. Of course, fusing electronic music with aggressive rock music is nothing new. It's actually been a trend for the last 5 or 10 years. If you look at like the so-called electronic core movement with bands like Attack Attack or Icy Stars or Crown the Empire, bands that take metalcore and add keys and excessive production to it. But Starset is a lot more melodic than those bands, and unlike those bands, they fully commit to that electronic portion of it. And given all the space and astronomy themed lyrics on this album, it makes sense. These bombastic, computerized sounds fit with lyrics about galaxies colliding and sending out your rocket ship after someone and whatnot. I mean, if you think about it, if you go all the way back to the early 80s with like a Kraftwerk album like Computer World, electronic music and the future have always had this like symbiotic relationship. That being said, I was immediately turned off by the ultra synthetic, processed sound of this album. Like even the vocals and the guitars, which I sort of expected to hold down this album's roots as a rock album, I can't even tell if they're real. The vocals are so tampered with, and the guitars are so digital, and I understand this is on purpose, but just personally as a listener, I need to hear some semblance of humanness in rock music, even when it's fused with electronic music. A perfect example of this electronic rock fusion working for me and retaining some of its humanness is the electronic band Pendulum, who on their Immersion album had a track called Self vs. Self, where they collaborated with Swedish death metal legends In Flames. And it's a killer track because on one hand you have these waves of synthesizers and synthetic drum and bass grooves, but on the other hand you have these very alive metallic riffs, and you have passionate screamed vocals from Anders Frieden. It sounds like In Flames in the electronic world. It's a really nice blend. Another example, of course, is a band like Ratatat, who incorporates soulful twin guitar harmonies into purely electronic music. On Vessels, I'm just not getting enough of anything organic. And in rock music, that's an important element to me. Although in this case, I do see the vision. I see how Starset are attempting to set themselves apart by just totally immersing themselves in this computerized, theatrical sound. But the thing is, yes, it is different, but the histrionically angsty choruses and the suffocating overproduction and the down-tuned 3-note guitar riffs aren't that different. They're actually all too familiar to me. Take a track like Ricochet. That's one of those choruses where if you've heard enough radio rock, you can sit there during the chorus and predict the next note of the melody before it's sung. Then there's the chorus on the track Bringing It Down, which, it's safe to say, borrows heavily from like every hook on the first 2 3 Days Grace albums. Like even the way frontman Dustin Bates enunciates the words "at night" with like that forced, edgy grit that characterize a lot of early 3 Days Grace songs. So again, it's not that different really, especially when you subtract these totally unnecessary extended cinematic outros that are just tacked on to the end of a lot of these songs, like Last to Fall, or Telepathic, or Die For You, or Everglow, or Bringing It Down, just to name a few. I'm not really sure what these added outros add to songs that are really just radio rock songs that incorporate electronic music. But the thing is, when I let myself see past these flaws that clearly irritate me, there's some fun music on here. Some of the synth lines that Bates and Co. have concocted are so fucking catchy, like the post-chorus section on Telepathic, or on the song Monster, which has the added effect of a crowd chanting along to the synth line, which just makes it sound massive. I mean, a song like Monster could easily slide its way into one of my workout playlists, because it gets me fucking amped if I don't think about how corny it is. So there's that. I also really like the song Starlight, probably my favorite song on the whole album. Lots of sharp, memorable vocal melodies on that one. And the climactic moments on the closing track, Everglow, have some real power to them from about like the 4-minute, 10-second mark onward. And yes, immediately infectious choruses are in abundance on this album. Die For You, Last to Fall, Into the Unknown, Satellite, just to name a few. But the problem is, the choruses often end up being the only thing you remember about these tracks, because around the hook, it is often just a swamp of breathy singing and guitar riffs that are really non-guitar riffs. So the reality is, strong active rock radio hooks and the occasional cool synth line aren't enough to hang your hat on. This album would have really benefited from some actual guitar riffs, like that Pendulum song I mentioned. You know, that song had killer riffs to go along with the electronic soundscapes around them. Like, when did these cookie cutter pseudo-djenty grooves start replacing well-constructed guitar riffs that can stand on their own and can serve as mini hooks? Like, that's one of the hallmarks of rock music, and I can't point to a single example of that on here. But I can clearly see that this is an earnest effort from an ambitious band. It's just not quite for me. But I can totally see how people are into it. I would almost go as far as to say this is a record that I would strongly recommend to people who enjoy this style of rock music, because I think this album contributes to that category nicely. It's not up my alley because there's really no riffs, and some of it feels a bit gimmicky. But the truth is that I can't get a bunch of these songs out of my head. There are a bunch of songs on here where I completely buy in to the melodrama and to the engulfing production. So it feels unfair of me to completely bash this when it worked on me for a few songs. Then again, it is clearly more of like a surface level enjoyment of these songs than anything that I think is going to endure. You know, I highly doubt I'm going to be listening to Vessels in 10 years. It's just too often the band try to use effects and embellishments as their calling card, as their main ingredient, instead of as the spice at the end of the recipe. But hey, I can tell that the opinions are going to run the gamut on this thing. So let me know what you thought of the record in the comment section. Vessels gets a 4 out of 10 from me. As always, thanks so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe, leave a comment, or shoot me a message so we can continue to talk music. And I'll see you guys soon.